part 2. So now we have made it to October, and for October, I, for the first time in my life, decided to read books according to the season. And so I tried to pick out a bunch of spookier books, not horror books. I'm not about trying to make myself scared because, again, I'm a wimp. But just books that were on the spookier side of things. And so I started out with the Monsters of Verity duology by V.E. Schwab, or Victoria Schwab? Victoria Schwab, because these are YA, not adult. And I really enjoyed these. This was my intro to Victoria Schwab. I'd heard so many good things about her, and so I wanted to start making my way through her books, which I have officially done and will continue to do so in 2021. I'm really looking forward to that. But I did really enjoy this duology. Next up, I read a giant children's book called The Little Night Cat by Sonja Danowski. The artwork is really detailed and there's a cat, so like, what's not to love? Next up, I read A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, and I really liked this book. I almost DNF'd it at the beginning because the writing style was pretty intense, kind of stream of consciousness and a little abrasive. There was a lot of info dumping and it was just hard to get into, but once I did, I loved it. The sequel comes out sometime in the middle of 2021, and I am really looking forward to getting my hands on that as well. Still in October, I read Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford, and this was probably my least favorite book of the year. It was just really different. It was maybe a little bit too much like magical realism. I don't know. It was body horror. There was a lot of body horror and not a lot of plot or character development. So I didn't really enjoy it. I do love this edition. It's the UK edition. So shiny and cool. But don't ever need to read this again. At least it was short. I probably only finished it because of how short it is. Then the week of Halloween, I read what was probably definitely the spookiest book of the year for me, which was House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. And this, man, this gave me nightmares. I read this before bed plenty of nights, and I made my husband go take the dog outside on those nights because there was no way I was going outside in the dark. There just was no way. Again, I'm a wimp, but this freaked me out. But it was really good. It was really fun. It was just too much like watching a horror movie for my taste. But I do highly recommend it. I definitely enjoyed it, just probably won't be reading it again. Because like I said, I don't like being scared. Also in the month of October, I finished the audiobook for The Thunderhead, book 2 in the Archivicide series by Neil Shusterman. This was also really good. I've already said it, the entire side series is one of my favorites of 2020. Loved this, really enjoyed the narrator. Highly recommend the audiobook or the physical book, whatever you prefer. And lastly, for the month of October, I read the manga Orange by Ichigo, this is upside down. And last up for the month of October, I read the manga Orange by Ichigo Takano. This was the only manga that I read in 2020, but I really enjoyed it. When I heard the premise and saw the art style, I just had to have it. And it was and it was really good. I blew through this entire series. So now we're in the month of November, and like I said, I blew through the entire series of Orange, read all of it in a matter of days. So volume 2 and this like extra third book were the first things that I read in November. The next book that I read in November was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is an amazing book. It is kind of a historical, low fantasy, sort of. And I'm sure that you've heard of it because it was super hyped in 2020. So I'm definitely glad I got around to reading this as soon as I possibly could. Next up for November, I read The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This is a fantasy classic. It's also a children's movie that I watched a bunch when I was a kid, so this was very nostalgic for me. And I found that I really, really enjoyed the book more than the movie even. I loved the writing style. It was very reminiscent of Patrick Rothfuss, or I guess Patrick Rothfuss is reminiscent of Peter S. Beagle because he came first. But I really enjoyed the writing style, really loved getting to relive this story with even more detail than what's in the movie, and I highly suggest this to anybody who likes classic fantasy or who likes Patrick Rothfuss, because I mean the writing style is great. Next up for November, I finished out the Strange the Dreamer duology with Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. While I probably liked the first book in the duology best, this one did have a lot going for it. I really liked getting in the heads of some of the other characters in the book, some of the side characters, and the ending, man. The ending took such a turn. I was so not expecting that. But yeah, ended up really liking it. And this duology definitely left me wanting to read more of Laini Taylor's works. Next up, I read An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This was recommended to me by lots of booktubers as a great fall read, and so I read it kind of in the late fall, but around Thanksgiving, so it still counts as fall. And it was as advertised. It is kind of a nice, fluffy fantasy romance and just made me feel really good. It was a nice read, and it definitely makes me want to pick up, I think it's called The Sorcery of Thorns and Roses. I might have that wrong, but by the same author. I know a lot of people like that book but don't like this one, or vice versa, but I'm hoping I like both of them. Still in November, the next book that I read was Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, also known as The Final Empire. And this is very possibly my favorite book of 2020. I adore this book. I really liked how approachable Brandon Sanderson's writing style was. The characters were very well fleshed out. They were sort of morally gray in that they had more motives than just, I want to do what's right. I really enjoyed reading through the story and getting to know these characters. And the last book that I finished in November was The Toll, book 3 in the Arc of a Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. Again, I listened to this on audiobook and it just solidified my love for the series. I love the series, it's wonderful. You should read it. Actually, you should listen to the audiobook because it's wonderful. Now for December. So first up for December, I read The Well of Ascension, which is the second Mistborn book by Brandon Sanderson. And while I really love this book and I'm really excited, I say really a lot, I'm really excited to read the third book this month in January. I was a little taken aback at first by the fact that there is literally like a year between when the first book ends and this one begins. And to be honest, this book did not do what I thought it was going to do with the storyline, which was a pleasant surprise. I mean, I don't always want to be able to anticipate what's going to happen next, so that worked for me really well. And I'm really excited to pick up the third and final book in this series. After finishing the second Mistborn book, I decided to pick up the Mistborn prequel. This is Arcanum Unbounded by Brandon Sanderson, which is a collection of a bunch of his short stories that all take place in the Cosmere, I believe. And so in here is the Mistborn prequel, which is called The 11th Metal. I'll put a picture up here of what it looks like if you just search for the short story itself. So I can't really say what this is about without any spoilers, but we follow one of the main characters in the Mistborn Final Empire book, Kelsier, on one of his like little mini adventures before the events of the first Mistborn book. Next for December, I read D, A Tale of Two Worlds by Michelle Faber. And I thought this book kind of read like a middle grade book, which I was not expecting, but I did really enjoy it. I was a little shocked at first to see that the beginning of this book takes place in our world. I was expecting more of a high fantasy, but it turns out this is a portal fantasy. But it was good. I'm not angry I read it or anything, but it just didn't blow my mind. Next for December, I read 2 Ruby books, Ruby After the Fall and Before the Dawn. These are like companion novels to a TV show that my husband and I watched that we really enjoy. I just really liked being back in this world and back with these characters. There are actually a bunch of side characters, so I got a lot of extra information that isn't in the TV show, and it was really enjoyable. It really felt like I was watching episodes from the TV show, which was great. And last but not least, for December, last book in 2020, I read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. And I listened to this on audiobook while reading along for the most part. And I was literally reading this until kind of late in the evening on Christmas Eve, on New Year's Eve. So I was cutting it a little close, but I was determined to finish this in 2020, and I did. This was the first space opera that I've ever read, and I think it was a really good entry into space operas. Mostly I say that because I enjoyed it, so it must have been a good first entry into space operas. And I look forward to seeing what Christopher Paolini does in this world, it's our world, but it's the future of our world. I look forward to seeing what he does with this story in the future. It concluded enough to be a standalone, but clearly more could be written using this storyline. I also really look forward to picking up more space operas in 2021. And I think that's it. That's all 55 books that I read in the year 2020. Again, I'm super proud of that number. I'm really happy that I was able to devote that much time to reading this past year, and I hope that 2021 will follow suit. So if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would please subscribe, that would really help. And please leave a comment about any books that you read in 2020. How many books did you read? Did you reach your goal? And if you read any of the books that were on my list, tell me what you thought about them. Which were your favorites and which were your least favorites? Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!